Now it's time to work a little bit more on the village area. As the sun goes up, it moves this way, and the light starts hitting this side of the hill. A short while ago, if you remember, the entire village was in the shadow of the hill, but now the sunshine is reaching some parts of the village. So I'm putting shadows by not putting it everywhere. I mixed cobalt blue and dioxazine purple and for the shadow color, and I diluted a little bit and then put this mixture color in the shadowy part of the village. Although it is not my intent to paint too meticulously or too carefully, I know this is one area that I have to be a little bit more careful, that I have to pay a little bit more attention to the details so that I can save light. Although I'm putting shadows in the village, I'm looking at each building to figure out where that light is, and then I try to avoid painting where I see it. Like when I was putting the dark reflections in the water a while ago around each boat, this also is a bit tedious work requiring fair amount of concentration on my part. But I try to move my brush as fast as I can and try not to go over where I touch the paper already, because economy of brush stroke is always important. So the color, the right color, and the right value, I always try to make the best judgment of that, and I use it just once. For the stunning view it offers, it's no wonder this terrace where I'm painting is a very popular place for tourists. Many people have already stopped here to take some photos. And also, it seems like a popular gathering place for villagers. Many local people have been here just to sit on the bench for a while, to feed the pigeons, or just to chat among each other. You just heard the two old gentlemen speaking to each other right next to me. There's always something happening on this terrace where I am. Now all the shadows in the village were placed. I made this color mixture a little thicker, which was made from cobalt blue and dioxazine purple, and I added a little bit of burnt sienna to it, and I used this precisely in the transition area from the village to the promenade, around the umbrellas and other things happening in the left-hand corner of the foreground area. And I want to take this opportunity to remind you that all the darks so far have been placed on the dry paper. So the color and the value that I have in my brush, it gets transferred almost the same way on the paper. But if you do the same thing but on a web paper, you get totally different result. So make sure when you place darks, your paper is dry. Dry brush strokes, like I've been attempting here and there, are beautiful when done properly. But doing this too much would give a painting a look that is a little too tight, a little too busy. So I'm trying to make sure that I have a good mix, good balance between hard look and soft look. Even though I said shadows are placed on the dry paper, sometimes it may be necessary to soften the look by wetting the paper from time to time. So how would I know that I have a good mix of two different styles in my painting? I must admit that I pretty much rely on my gut. But I can also say at this point in the process, I'm more mindful. I'm always checking if I'm achieving harmonious feel in my painting. I think that is important because we tend to get more tunnel vision when we work on the details. So it's really important, especially towards the end of the process, towards the end of the painting, that you step back as often as you can to check the balance, check what's happening, and check if your painting is coming together in a cohesive way. Now that the painting is mostly finished, all that has to be done from this moment on is to put finishing touches. I like to point out that by choosing this view, I knew that I have to focus on something instead of painting everything in the same way, and my choice to be focused on was the harbor area where the boats are. So I know I have to take a look at there and make sure that I have enough impact. So if I can give it a little bit more of that by adding interesting or important details, that's what I have to add to this painting. Having said that, equally important here is that I don't depict everything too literally. So, for example, some of the boats, I see there are cabins, but I kind of ignored it. And instead, I put the similar looking boats in the harbor area of my painting. I also see motors and masts and nets and fishing gear and all kinds of things, but I don't really think I need them all. I think I'd rather have something meaningful instead of the reality. For what I mean by that is, for something to be meaningful, I just look at it as an element. It could be a shape, it could be a color, it could be something that adds to a special character to a scene. Whatever that is, it has to contribute to the enhancement of what I'm trying to say in this painting, so that the viewer's eye will move around to understand what I'm communicating here. And so that also means it has to help make the overall design in this composition stronger. That's how I look at it. Any shape, any color, even a brush mark, if it does anything in the design to make it better, it has a place in this painting. I try not to be too fussy in terms of showing each shape. It doesn't have to be precise, it doesn't have to be too perfect, but it has to read well. So what I'm trying here is to clean up the look of some of the boats, because when I was painting around them, I was in a bit of a hurry. It looks a little rough over there. In this case, I have to use white to tidy up the rough edges. So that's why I'm using titanium white instead of other types of white, because this white is very opaque and has a strong covering power. I also use this white to mix it with a different color to make it opaque, to make some of the boats even more colorful. I want to make it clear that my white and some of the opaque pigments are watercolor. I know people have opinions about using opaque pigments in a watercolor painting, and I do have my opinion as well, but obviously I'm not a purist. I don't mind using opaque pigments, but I also want to say I like to minimize amount of opacity in my finished painting, because I believe watercolor painting should look more transparent. And I think that's one of the most beautiful qualities of this medium. Okay, I've been tweaking boats here and there like this at least for 5 minutes. So how much more should I be doing this? To be honest, I don't really know my answer, but I also know my gut will tell me when it's time to stop. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm going to be doing this a little bit more. As you can guess from the voices you hear behind me, I'm surrounded by quite a few people here. Some local, some tourists. In fact, a lady, she looks like a tourist, just asked me whether she could take a photograph of me painting. Well, it's nice. She likes what I'm doing, but I just had to say no. And then she went away. Unless you're painting in the wilderness where there's nobody else but you, this kind of thing can happen anytime, anywhere. When you go outside to paint, other people coming over to watch what you're doing and ask you questions sometimes. You might have heard some of the typical questions you may hear are, oh, how long did it take you to do this? Or did you do this? Oh, I'm also a painter. Do you know this artist? Sometimes they go on and on and on. Yes, this kind of thing happened to me many, many times. Sometimes I don't mind engaging myself in a little chat as long as they don't stay too long. But I will understand it can be distracting or a little bit inconvenient, to say the least. So it is important to be firm in letting them know that you're working. If this happens, just smile and say thank you and go back to work. I must admit, though, I feel quite amused to hear what they're saying, even though I don't really understand what they're talking about because it's in Italian and they're talking fast. But I feel like I'm in an Italian movie, and this makes the whole experience even more memorable for me. If you remember in the beginning, I talked about composition and whether I should be choosing something in it to focus on. And also the value structure, the relationship between lights and darks in the composition. So that's what I planned ahead of time before I actually began painting, and I proceeded with the plan. In my teaching, I always tell my students to make a plan ahead of time for successful painting, especially for composition and value. In a plein-air situation, that may mean finding the best angle and the best light condition, and on top of that, make some changes to make an improvement in those areas. There's this guy coming to talk to me. You probably noticed the brightly colored uniform of the cleaning crew that was chatting in front of me. One of them just came over to take a look at my painting, and he said, "Complimenti, well done." And I responded with, "Grazie, thank you." I know it's a little thing, but a little interaction like this with the local people, you never forget it. You never forget the place, and you never forget everything else that happened during the trip. And I love it. Maybe that's why I keep traveling. All right, before that guy came over, I talked about how I start my painting. But what I'm showing you right now is how I finish my painting, which was not planned. And I have to say, usually I don't plan, or I can't plan too far ahead of time. So this part is almost totally intuitive. What I have to do to finish, I didn't know in the beginning, but at this moment, I know, or I should know, by looking at what had happened up to this point and what's missing in order to have a complete image that I envisioned in the beginning. And at the same time, at this moment, what I try the hardest is to create the balanced look in the image, to see whether there is a harmonious feel to it. So I look at the design elements like the color, the value, shape, positive shape, negative shape, and line work, and the texture, all kinds of things to make sure each one looks great, and then also they all work together in the same context. Let me elaborate on what I'm talking about by taking example of, let's say, a mast, because that's what I have been putting in some of the boats. So if you look at it as a mast, you can only find it in the harbor because that's usually inside the boat. But if you look at it as a short vertical line, it could be someplace else, because it could be a corner of a house, or it could be a shadow of a person walking on the street, for example. Another use, for example, maybe earlier I was putting buoys using orange in the harbor because they're in the color, but I also put similar marks in the street indicating there are people wearing clothes in that color over there. So this is another case where I was not looking at buoys as buoys, but just as a small orange shape, and that allowed me to find something similar in the rest of the painting to create a more cohesiveness in the image. I think it's important to look at the view not too realistically, but more in an abstract way, taking all the elements as abstract shapes. I think that's a good approach to have a good quality in the design of a painting, because you have to make everything come together. Especially in the view I chose, like I pointed out in the beginning, there was a risk to have 2, 3, or even 4 separate images in one, because there's a sky, there's a village, there's a promenade, there's a harbor. I knew it would be a challenge to make everything come together. So I find it very useful for me to see things everywhere as abstract shapes, because that way I can understand better how the design is working out, and also I can make sure that separate spaces are connected and well put together. Another important thing on my checklist is to look at the values. Even though I made an initial plan by doing a value sketch, I have to look at it again in the final image and ask myself if I did a good job, or do I have enough light? Do I have too much light? Are my darks dark enough? And all the contrasts that the light and dark created, do they look good? Do they read well in this painting? And I just found lower right hand corner in the water, I found the light is a little too bright. So I darkened it a little bit, and also the color temperature is a little too warm. I needed to have a little darker and cooler feel there. So I gave the area another wash. The color I chose was a mixture of cobalt blue and a little bit of lavender. Creating, let this guy pass. creating color harmony by juxtaposing warms and cools is also an excellent way to have a good result. Speaking of color, it's probably the best thing to use in a painting to convey your feelings or to communicate a sense of time, sense of place. That's how I look at it. But I don't really plan too much about it in the beginning. Rather, I deal with it more intuitively as I paint. I do decide though in the beginning what kind of color feel I want to achieve in the finished painting. So I think of the color temperature, what kind of color temperature is more appropriate. So I'm in southern Italy in late summer doing this painting, and I didn't want this painting to have a cold feel, but it's not terribly sunny day, and then there's a little bit of breeze. I kind of chose cool to be a dominant color temperature with warmth permeating throughout. As an underpainting in the first wash, I use mostly warm colors. In the shadow I put afterwards, I use mostly cooler colors. So to create a kind of color balance, I was hoping to capture the light I saw this morning. There are so many things to think about when we do a painting: value, color, composition, design, etc., etc. But the most important thing is to recognize that we're always learning something new when we paint. So don't give up, keep going, enjoy the process, and you have a positive experience, and that's important for us. After I finish tweaking a couple more spots, I feel there's no more I should be adding to this painting. If I do, I may overwork it. I like to say I appreciate you staying with me to watch my demonstration. And also, I like to apologize if there is any part that was hard to hear because of the buzzing sound coming from the constant traffic behind me, and also friendly neighbors having their daily morning conversation just a few feet from me. But this is the reality of painting outside. This is also the beauty of being a part of the daily life of the local people of the place where you're visiting. Well, it's time to put down my brush and sign my painting. And I'll take off the tape and let's look at the result together. So this painting was about the morning light captured in the authentic fishing village of an Italian island. Well, this is it. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. If you're painting alone, I wonder how yours turned out. Well, I look forward to seeing you again at the next watercolor or Plein-Air event. Until then, this was Keiko Tanabe, painting from the island of Procida, southern Italy. Goodbye.